Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. The very first item on the work session is a special session. Can I get a motion to go into special session, please?
So moved.
Moved by Kristen,
Second.
by Austin. Discussion. All in favor? Motion carries. The approval of an ordinance to amend the City Code, Chapter 173-5, public exhibitions at dangerous elevations.
Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and city council to approve the attached ordinance to amend the code of the city of Hagerstown, section 173-5, entitled Public Exhibitions at Dangerous Elevations. The amendment will enable the mayor and council to grant an exception to the prohibition against being engaged or concerned in any show or public exhibition by ropes, chains, or apparatus suspended at dangerous elevation above the ground, subject to such restrictions and conditions as the mayor and council may impose.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Approval of change order for sidewalk accessibility.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move the approval of additional funding of $14,000 in parking funds for the 2018 sidewalk accessibility ramp contract 18-SA-03 to install ramps and replace entrances along Church Street at the public parking lots. Staff previously approved an additional $20,000 in CDBG funds to complete accessible ramps along 2018 pavement preservation streets, and the two items together exceed the maximum $25,000 threshold for staff approval. All work will be completed at the competitively bid contract unit prices. I further authorize staff to issue the appropriate change orders to the contract.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, coming out of the special session, the work session, Chris Kindle, event update, Amanda Whitmore, downtown coordinator.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We are here to talk about the Chris Kindle event. That is an event that the Main Street Hagerstown program is hosting on December 1st. Main Street is a program of the city, and we have Monica Workman here, who's our lead volunteer for the event, but she also serves as the organization chair for the work group. So would you like to
Sure.
give some details?
So the Quiz Kindle last year, I don't know if you guys remember, last year it was the inaugural event, and so this year is the second annual. And last year we won a square. This year we're going to be at the USMH lot park area and courtyard. That's what it's called. And we're more than double in size this year. We have 47 vendors. Last year we had 22. So the interest has definitely gone up on the vendor side. And we have some fabulous vendors. There's going to be tons of gifts, lots of food, cool arts and crafts, because it's an artisan and food event, of course. And Santa's going to be there for 3 hours. So there'll be, people can get pictures with Santa, and he'll walk around and be jolly. And we're just really excited, because I think the space, even though we're worried about visibility, but we're going to have a lot of vendors out front on this, on the sidewalk. So it should still be nice and visible, and we're going to make sure that people see it on the square as well. And the advertising will be the same as it was last year, maybe even a little bit more. We have more radio stations on board. Hagerstown Magazine just came, I think, in the mail yesterday, and there's an article in there which is really nice. So if you haven't seen that yet, check it out. And so the attendance should be just as good, if not better. So if y'all can help us spread the word, that would be wonderful. It's just it's just a really cool family event, and that is double in size this year. It's just really exciting. So, yep.
We have Glühwein back again this year. Dieter from the Stube applied for a special day liquor license to offer beer, and it's like a mulled wine, warmed wine that we had last year. We're going to have that again this year at the University Plaza.
Yeah. And that'll be easier too, because we have the fence around, so it'll be easier to monitor that. Yeah. We don't have to put all that silly, not too good looking fencing up that we had last year. So it'll be a lot. Decorating wise, we can go all out a little bit more. So I think it'll be a good event having it right there. Now, once we grow more, if we do the same thing again next year and double again, then we're going to have to find another spot. But so anyway, we're happy with the way it's turning out. So come out and see it and spread the word.
Yeah, good job on doubling your vendors.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
great.
Yeah.
That's great
Really good.
news. It's fantastic. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, discussion continues on the beautification of railroad overpasses.
I'm back.
Rocks, rocks.
So I think the last time you asked to get some prices for a couple different ideas. The one option, what we're calling option 7, was now we're specifically talking about Antietam Street, just to be clear about that. It's the area where there's this open space between the abutment wall and the sidewalk on the south side of those 2 bridges. So the one we're calling option 7 is the timbers that are placed and then rock placed within them to try to create a slope there. That, as sketched there, is about $7,000 per bridge. It could be reduced in price some if we reduced some of the timbers and maybe didn't fill it up quite as steeply. We could get it down to maybe as much as $4,500 per bridge, and there's 2 bridges. Or we could, the other thing about rock was, we had the 2 options before. Option 5 was gabions, building baskets and everything in there, which was $23,000. We're just dumping rock in there, which was $6,000. This is kind of a compromise between the 2, and that it looks neat, and the price is in between. Then the other idea was those geometric patterns. If you remember, Leslie Wally had some ideas about that. I kind of struggled, to be honest with you, to find a source for those kind of shapes. I did find one, and I got some prices on that. And it would take quite a few of them under there to stack it up so that, we'd have the effect that we're looking for. And so the price of that for both bridges was $26,000. So it's really up to you all what you want to do on Antietam Street. I will say on Franklin Street, I do have a meeting next week with the Director of Art for Washington County to try to get the students involved in painting murals for that one. And the other one, I think on Washington Street, we're talking about having maybe a professional artist do that. Of course, all these things have to get funded, and we have to figure that out too. But once we know what we want to do, I'll work with Michelle, and we'll come up with a plan for that.
You had said try to create a slope. Do you see that there may be a problem creating a slope for this type of thing?
No, I think right now it's pretty much level, and any slope that we create would be good. We could either build it up fairly steep, or I guess what I was trying to say is maybe not quite as steep of a
Okay.
slope to save some money.
Okay.
Of bringing in material. But no, we can create it either way.
Okay.
I mean, I still like option 7. I definitely like the timbers. I would prefer it not to be a steep slope, because I still think that it would look pretty cool with a mural of some
Yeah, we're
train-oriented
yeah.
feature
I'm in.
In the back.
above
Rocks
it,
and mural.
almost like it's on top of
Yeah.
the track.
Yeah. And I think we get the students
Yeah.
to create that mural, put it on panels, be able to attach it and take it off then if it gets, ruined or anything, and then they can redo it, or, I like that idea.
I like the addition of art. I think that is something
Okay.
new and keeps consistent with the other bridges.
I think what they're saying is put it in here.
Right.
Okay.
Above. Right.
Yeah, so it would be like right back in there.
Almost like a side profile of the
Yeah.
train, like it's actually on.
Because as much as the spheres are kind of, they're interesting, and it's a cool concept, but then it's like we have these 2 bridges that have art under them, and then we have spheres on another bridge. So it'd be nice to have some sort of consistency with, under each overpass.
I think the art
Yeah.
takes care of all the issues.
Yeah,
if you
that's
do
what I
that.
mean.
And
Yep.
you can change it out.
Right,
Yeah.
no, I totally agree.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Work with the Board of Ed on that particular one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the cheapest route to go, rather than paying a professional.
And I think the students will do a good job on it, to create an engine or a boxcars or whatever.
Right.
It's a good community project.
Yeah,
It's-
for sure.
Yeah,
Having said that, I just want to reemphasize what a wonderful mural we have over University Plaza now. If grant money can be found for professionals, obviously, I think we have enough artwork right now under the bridges to keep students busy for a long time, is my guess. So I would just encourage us to see if we can get some grants for some of this, for people to do it.
I can do that.
State highway or something.
I think we mentioned this last time, but have we talked to the railroads themselves? Would they be interested in funding anything?
Good luck.
I'm glad you laughed. Saved me from having to.
Oh my gosh.
I get railroad.
Okay.
I know, my word, are you okay?
Everybody okay?
Put an eye out with that.
Railroads are an interesting animal.
They, all kidding aside, CSX does have a arm of their business that does community engagement, community donations. We could try to contact them. Don't hold your breath, but we can certainly
No, it's
try.
worth a shot. I mean, even for the, for the
Doesn't hurt to ask.
train mural or something, maybe they have some artwork that is
Sure,
already available.
absolutely.
That could do
It's not a lot of money you're talking
No.
about, so. And I certainly can go after a grant for the, what I'm thinking is Washington Street will be the students and Franklin would be the more professional one, because it's longer and, we can go after a grant for that.
So I'm not confused. We're talking about option 7 on Antietam.
Yes.
Correct,
Correct.
We're not talking about option 7 on Washington and Franklin.
correct.
Talking about option 2 on Franklin and Washington, the mural panels, which I don't have a, well, there, and there's. It's basically looks like a fence going down the middle of the sidewalk, but on the fence is murals.
Right.
So the resulting sidewalk is 5 feet wide.
I hope that when you meet with Board of Ed, that they reach out to Antietam Academy as well, because our teacher there, Mike McGinnis, has an awesome art program. I know they've done some stained glass and some other really cool stuff, but they get left out a lot. Antietam Academy does. So maybe reach out to them directly. They have an awesome art program.
Okay. Yeah, I'll see, I'll let you all know what they say, but, they seem very interested when I reached out to them.
It's a great project.
Yeah. And I think it's doable for them. They can do it in their classroom, take the panels, and then we can install them out in the field, so they don't have to be out in traffic and all that stuff.
Okay.
Great,
Okay.
thank you, Rodney.
Thanks,
That's
Rodney.
wonderful. Appreciate it.
Land Management Code amendments.
Good afternoon. All right. It's a lot.
Yes, it is.
We tried to group it into sort of manageable bites. So on October 24th, the Planning Commission finalized their package of recommended amendments to the city's land management code, which is a combination of zoning, subdivision, floodplain, and forest conservation. They went through, months and months of review with staff, and we had a public hearing, we got some input, and so that final version was forwarded on to you on the 24th. We're scheduling, actually started the advertisements for the hearing for your review at the end of this month. And so this is an opportunity to give you an overview before then. Believe it or not, the presentation you'll get at the public hearing will be even more detailed than what I'm proposing to give to you right now, because we'll be following the PowerPoint, which I gave to you. This memo is trying to give you more of, this is the substantive stuff we're changing. There's a lot of little teeny tiny stuff that's being recommended to be changed that's more providing clarity, fixing mistakes that got missed in prior amendment packages. So we're going to try to hit the highlights tonight. And then in the hearing, which is where you give the public an opportunity to understand hopefully understand what we're proposing, and then give us some feedback, there'll be a little more detail provided on the 27th. I didn't want to give you the same presentation tonight for fear you would lose the will to live by the 27th when we have the hearing. So this is intended to be briefer tonight. So just to give you, and we gave you 3 memos because there's 2 areas where it's pretty specific. One about signs upgrades to try to be compliant with the recent Supreme Court ruling about temporary signs and content, one about the fair housing, which is pretty substantial assessment we did and recommendations we're recommending, and then the first part that I'll give you right now is just the miscellaneous stuff. So, for the miscellaneous things, or for the whole thing, we grouped it under about eight themes. And I'll just go through and point out the themes, the way they're grouped. Otherwise, it's just, you're going all over the place, like, dogs are red, and then flowers are pretty, and then buildings are brown. Is the way it goes if you just go by page, so we try to group them together into like topics. The first one would be protecting neighborhood character and enhancing safety in our community. There's a lot of little stuff in there. The most substantive change, perhaps, is adding into our site plan standards, crime prevention through environmental design principles, the things that the police department looks for when you're designing a development. How can you design it so that it has natural sight lines and so forth, so people can help watch a place to deter crime? And so that's what we're proposing. That's probably the most substantive change for that. Increasing housing choices and diversity is the next one. The most substantive changes there are the addition of rooming houses to the code and modification of how group homes are permitted currently. The group homes, I'll go over that in a little more detail under that fair housing review. For the rooming houses, and we've been talking about this a bit as we've conferred about whether to have a hotel licensing program, thinking that if we were to start saying if you're going to have long-term stay in a hotel, then you have to have these amenities. If those hotels don't have it, then the folks that are living there, as a stopgap, fail-safe, they're going to be lost. And so a rooming house would be an alternative to that, and they're set up more for long-term living than a short-term stay hotel is. And so what we're proposing is to allow it in the RH, which is the apartment zone, the RO, which is a sort of a mixed-use office apartment, any kind of housing type of zone, the CG, which is commercial general, and outside the smart growth A&E district portion of the CCMU, which is the downtown. It would have to meet the fire code and property maintenance code requirements for density and amenities, and that's spelled out in the text, but just for the overview, I'll just tell you it's got to meet those requirements, which would have to anyway. Provide for a 24-hour per day on-site supervisor representing the owner. We used to allow rooming houses in the city, and we stopped allowing them because we weren't satisfied with the way they were being managed. And so this is a way to try to make sure there's good management. Have on-site 24 hours a day, someone representing the owner. And then a maximum of 16 rooming units per facility. And then a change that came out of the public hearing process is except for the possibility of an increased number of units in the CG zone with a special exception from the Board of Zoning Appeals. This came up at the request of the new owner of the Garden Plaza Hotel because he thinks he would like to be able to repurpose the tower in the back. He doesn't need it for the hotel, and some kind of residential use would be what he was thinking about. And rooming house was, but 16 is not enough rooms because there's, I don't know, close to 50 rooms back there. So that's the rooming house proposal. The third grouping, expand economic opportunity and permitting greater flexibility in the code. So add new uses of distillery pub, wine pub, and then this is a long way of saying stadium, multi-purpose arena for sporting events, entertainment, and other assembly events. That's a typo. Provide greater flexibility for brew pubs, artist studios, photography studios, conversion districts, retail and restaurants in the professional office mixed-use district, and uses in shopping centers that have a separation requirement. Extend the period for approval of site plans to match the new soil conservation district provisions. Currently, it's 2 years and it expires. Soil conservation is going to 3 years, so we're proposing to match what they're doing. Ease the threshold for minimum work completed to maintain a PUD approval. Right now, it's kind of vague, and PUDs are usually very big, like Hager's Crossing over behind Walmart is a planned unit development of 900-ish rooming units when it's done. It takes a long time to finish one of those projects. And so this is just making it a little bit clearer. Having some amount underway will keep it. Otherwise, if you never start these things, then the PUD goes away and it reverts back to the base zoning. So this is just trying to provide a little more flexibility because we know it's going to take a long time for a PUD to be finished, to be built out. For example, Hager's Crossing started during the boom and it still has a ways to go. Expand the Planning Commission's waiver provisions and development review. Right now, it's a little, they have the ability to provide waiver provisions, but this just clarifies what are the types of things that they need to be looking at in order for something to be contemplated for a waiver from their design provisions. And then number 4, setting clear expectations for the public and investors. There's a large number of amendments under here that are fairly minor. Perhaps the most substantive changes require each new dwelling unit to be located on its own lot, including new apartment buildings. This is something that came out of comments that were coming from the Marin City Council in review of a housing authority project where they were putting what looks like townhouses on bulk lots. So there was not going to be one dwelling unit per lot. And the feeling was we should be approving development that allows for the possibility of homeownership in the future. But if you put 12, 15 units on one lot, then that makes it very difficult. So that's proposing this new provision that each new dwelling unit must be located on its own lot, including new apartment buildings, which would require for a different kind of design than we typically see in Hagerstown, which is usually, you get the cookie cutter shape for the 12-unit box, and you just fit as many as you can get on there and then snake a driveway through the middle of it with parking pads. This would require them now to be on their own lot fronting on a street. They were ahead of schedule. And then the other item is, right now we have minimum square footage requirements for apartments in the downtown. This is proposing that for dwelling units anywhere in the city, you should have a minimum square footage requirements, and the proposal is to match what the minimum is for apartments in the downtown would be the minimum square footage requirement for dwelling anywhere in the city. On the 5th grouping, improve resiliency for environmental hazards. There are only actually a couple of items here, and they both had to do with the floodplain. Proposed changes add more clarity for how, floodplain management. Basically what it's saying is that public and private streets, driveways, alleys, and parking areas have to have the driving surfaces above the base flood elevation unless otherwise approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. And that again is, came out of discussions that we had with the Marin City Council and the feeling that it shouldn't have a street or a driveway in a floodplain. The 6th item, providing suitable locations for social and medical services and tenancies consistent with surrounding neighborhoods. That I'll get into with the Fair Housing Report. Number 7, streamlining the process and cleanups to the code. Large number of minor changes, corrections to typos, expanding upon definitions, providing greater clarity. Just a lot of little teeny things that cleans up the code, provides more clarity to the public, more clarity for administration of the code by Steve. And so, but of the perhaps the most substantive changes have to do with forest conservation ordinance. You want to get into those two a little bit, Steve?
Yes, with the forest conservation ordinance, one of the things that we're looking at is to increase the penalty fee for noncompliance with the forest conservation ordinance. We're finding that the fee in lieu is actually higher than the nonconformance fee or noncompliance fee. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It hasn't risen since we adopted the forest conservation ordinance pushing 20 years ago. And frankly, we've only had to use it once. We've collected a nonconformance fee, a fairly substantial amount of money about 10 years ago for a developer who went in and cleared a bunch of trees without a forest conservation plan. It doesn't rear its head very often, but it's good to have a more substantial non-compliance fee. It's going to go from the existing 30 cents to 50 cents per square foot of area in non-compliance. Also, we have some language in there that requires that if somebody is doing compliance for forest conservation plan in another, required by another jurisdiction within the city, that it requires our planning commission to sign off on the proposal. This protects the city's interests because, let's say the city has identified a property that's a prime development property that should be developed commercially. Somebody could, in theory, purchase it and decide that they're going to use this for forest conservation for some other project. We have no control over it, and all of a sudden an important piece of property is having land use decisions made for it by bodies outside of this jurisdiction. So it's more of an insurance policy. We really don't see it happening hardly ever. It came up. It
just came up this year.
It just came up this year, and it was in a situation where it's very cooperative with the other jurisdiction. It's associated with the construction of Professional Boulevard and also the widening of Eastern Boulevard. It's actually the county is the other party. It's not a private developer, and we're working with them. It'll all work itself out. But it did raise the question of what happens if a private developer was to try to do this? So honestly, I don't see it being used hardly ever, but it's good to have if we need it. transparent thing within the ordinance, gives us a protocol.
And the eighth item is updating the on-premise sign regulations in the code to match the recent Supreme Court ruling, the town of Gilbert versus somebody or another. And Steve will go into that after I go through the fair housing assessment that we did. All right, this is the meatiest section of what we did. We've known for a while that our code has unequal treatment between housing and medical services for the general population and housing and medical services for the disabled population. And the federal fair housing laws and the 2015 Supreme Court ruling say that it's prohibited for zoning provisions or other policies that have more restrictive provisions placed on housing or services for protected classes than on housing or services for the general population. This is what is considered having a disparate impact. That was the Supreme Court portion. They went on to this disparate impact part. And protected classes, there's 7 federal protected classes: race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, familial status. The state added 3 more: marital status, gender identification, and sexual orientation. And according to a law session I attended at a planning conference this year, most lawsuits today, in the past they were based on racial discrimination. Most lawsuits today are in discrimination against disabled populations. Another item that we had to take into consideration, which came up during the public review process, is that the health article of the state code has provisions on how local zoning must treat group homes and halfway houses. They define what's a small group home and what's a large group home. And for a small group home, local zoning is they consider it the same as a single-family home, and it needs to be allowed anywhere you allow a single-family home in your community. And the larger ones, they consider to be a multifamily dwelling, and you need to allow that anywhere you allow multifamily in your community. And if you allow multifamily without a special exception, you cannot require a group home, a large group home with a special exception. You have to treat them equally per state code. Currently, our code does not do that. So we reviewed the land management code and identified where we had disparate provisions for housing and medical services. That's where it was coming up. So we devised a plan so that similar medical services are allowed in the same zoning districts, and so that group homes of certain sizes are allowed where similar density dwelling units are allowed. So the proposal that we have out of all of this that we did is to delete 3 of the existing uses in the code, which are problematic. Transitional residential facilities with in-house care for up to 3 residents being treated for substance abuse issues. Residential facilities with in-house care for up to 3 residents with mental and/or physical disabilities, and social assistance services for elderly and persons with disabilities. Proposing to remove those. Proposing to add rehabilitation center, assisted living facility, and outpatient substance abuse center. And we determined that those uses are similar to hospitals and nursing homes and should be allowed where they are allowed. Then the next step was, where do we allow hospitals and nursing homes in the city? And basically almost everywhere. And so, all the residential zones, downtown, and a variety of commercial zones. So what we did is we created a plan to limit the number of zones where hospitals and nursing homes are allowed, so it's compatible with the areas where they plan to go. So that in that case, we said, let's remove most of the residential districts in the downtown, create a new institutional zone that would be placed where currently we have our mod and our zoned institutional campuses around town. When you look at our zoning map, it looks like we just have tons of low-density housing, when in fact we have several large institutional campuses, whether that's Board of Education, the Western Maryland Hospital, nursing homes, parks, you name it. And so we're proposing to create this new institutional zone, rezone those properties during the next comprehensive rezoning, which will be the next thing we'll be here to talk to you about. And that rezoning would go where currently large complex campuses and parks are located. So with those changes, hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, rehabilitation centers, and outpatient substance abuse centers would all be in the same zones. The commercial general zone, the commercial regional zone, professional office mixed use, this new institutional zone, it's industrial mixed use, and the multifamily zone. Nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and rehabilitation centers would need to be on a minimum 1-acre tract in the RH zone. Currently, the code requires in residential zones, hospitals need to be on a minimum 5-acre tract. We looked to see what the sizes were of our existing nursing homes and assisted living facilities, and they were all, except for Holly Place, were all over 1 acre in size. So 1 acre seemed like a good place to start. Fourth thing, add group home, halfway house, and alternative living unit, and define the difference between small and large as prescribed by the state code. Up to 9 would be a small group home or small halfway house. 10 to 16 would be a large group home or large halfway house. And allow the small ones where we allow single family, and allow the large ones where we allow multifamily, again, as prescribed by state code. Fifth, add adult daycare with a vocational center. That's basically like Goodwill and ARC have facilities where their clients go and do like piecework during the day. Currently, we consider that under the social assistance services for elderly and persons with disabilities. This would be in place of that adult daycare with vocational center, and we would allow that anywhere where we currently allow light assembly, because that's basically the kind of work that's being done in these vocational centers. So that would be special exception in the CCUMU, which is downtown, professional office mixed use, and the industrial mixed use, and then allowed by right in the industrial restricted in the industrial general zone. Sixth, we discovered as we were going through all this, we have in the city one continuing care retirement community, and it's, I'm not exactly sure how it got approved where it is. It's on RH zone land, and yet it combines housing and commercial. You would think that that would have been in a mixed-use zone or PUD or something like that. So we're adding continuing care retirement communities on a minimum tract size of 20 acres. Our current one, which is Ravenwood, is well over that. The ones in Williamsport are well over that, so it seems to be that's a good minimum to have. Allow it in the RH, this new institutional zone, and as a planned unit development. And then finally, we added parking requirements for group quarters and outpatient substance abuse centers, and updated the parking requirements for hospitals and nursing homes. So that's all what's being proposed as a result of this fair housing assessment that we did of the code. And then Steve is going to try and be quick with the sign regulations proposal, which is somewhat daunting when you look at the package that's associated with signs.
Yes. What brought this forward is there was a Supreme Court case, it was known as Reed versus Town of Gilbert, and it was associated with the regulation of temporary signage and content of signage within zoning sign codes. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court came back with instructions that were a little difficult to interpret to some degree, and I'm hearing that throughout the planning community. But it focuses on content and temporary signage. Basically, what the Supreme Court said is that sign regulations can only deal with things that are typical of things that zoning would deal with, time, place, location, size, that kind of thing, and doesn't get into content. It was associated with a temporary sign that a church had on a property that was not where the church service was taking place, but they put a sign on this property. The church ended up being cited. They took it through the court system all the way to the Supreme Court, and Town of Gilbert was overturned. Looking around the planning community, we're finding this caused a ripple effect throughout, essentially, the planning community throughout the United States. Everybody started looking at their sign regulations, and most people's regulations did get into content.
Basically by exempting certain types of temporary signs based on their content.
Yes. So what we did is, who better to use as a model for addressing this than the body that went back and had to change its sign regulations to comply with the Supreme Court case decision that went against it, and that is the Town of Gilbert. So we went to Gilbert's sign regulations, and the village of Gilbert, which has about 8,000 people in it, I believe, had a sign section in their zoning ordinance as a result of this, which was about 60 pages long. And there's no way that we could do that within our zoning ordinance. So what we did is we took the important points and the regulatory points from the Gilbert requirements, and then wove them into our existing sign regulations within our zoning ordinance. We're not changing anything that we are typically used to when it comes to exactly how big a sign can be on the highway or mounted on the front of a building or whatever. None of that bulk stuff is changing, but what this is doing is it's causing us to create uniform standards within zoning districts for signage, for the most part, regardless of content. And when I say you can't take content into account, that's not entirely true. There's a couple of minor exceptions. But for the most part, all of our sign regulation is based now strictly on the features of the sign themselves. So for example, in a residential area, it sets a certain amount of signage that any house can have. Whether that's Save the Whales, whether that is a sign for Coldwell Banker saying my house is for sale, whatever, you're limited to a certain amount of signage. We do continue to prohibit the use of signage for home-based businesses, which are not supposed to have exterior evidence anyway. That is permissible because that's commercial signage, and there are still some exemptions within that Supreme Court decision associated with commercial signage. So nothing is absolute here, but we are much more focused on focusing on the physicals of the sign versus the content. We reached out to the Realtors Board and to the two main political parties, letting them know this has occurred. We had not heard anything back from them. We're going to reach out to them again because obviously they're going to have interest in this. And we'll reach out to them again to let them know that the public hearing is coming up on the 27th. So, once the election's over and everything tonight and things start calming down, bodies can maybe focus more on these things. And if they have concerns or questions, they can attend the hearing at the end of this month to deal with that. Because the way the ordinance was structured and the way we had to go about literally doing a lot of surgery on individual provisions, we also provided you a clean copy. Basically, we took it out of the edit mode and put it into, okay, if this is adopted, this is what it's going to say. So you have two versions here. You have the edit structure, which everything in blue is existing or proposed to be deleted text per the directions up here. But then this copy here marked draft as it would appear as final product is literally camera ready if you adopt it without changes.
Basically, it's adding really beefing up the public purpose section of the sign code. And then in the back, where we had a long list of exempted temporary types of signs, that gets reworked.
Figuring out how this all fit in and was compliant with the direction from the Supreme Court was very challenging. I would contact other planners in other jurisdictions asking them about this. I actually went to a couple of seminars at the American Planning Association conference specifically on this issue, and we were getting a lot of shrugs from some of the people, even the ones teaching the class, believe it or not. So it took a lot of interpretation from of the court's direction to come up with these, but this is consistent with Reed versus Gilbert's new regulations and the instructions that we've gotten from sign planners who are giving us seminars on this particular topic. So.
I would suggest that we take a hard look more than just of the changes, but take a look at what we've done in the past and revisit. The sign ordinance is great until we start enforcing it, and then we all start to see the results of enforcement. And we've just seen that with the liquor stores. And I know Kathy and I had had some discussions back and forth, but, when I look in here, one of the things that concerns me is, the requirement that everything is consistent. And I know, for instance, we had a liquor store that had a complaint. So we went out and started enforcing against that liquor store. But no others were enforced against until the issues came up. And now that issue came up, and we have 5 or 6 or so liquor stores being told what you've been doing throughout, including during the time the sign ordinance has been in effect, is illegal, and take it down or be subject to our penalties. And the things that I'm seeing, I just don't know that they're broken. And I would also like to see that we, it seems to me the Chamber of Commerce is one group that needs to be invited to a public hearing, and our business community. Because we get right back to where we've always been. Is I think the title of the email we got was "Enough is Enough." And it all envisions another, what we tried to do in that sign ordinance was to make sure in the areas we did it, that it was consistent with the county sign ordinances. I don't know if this is or it's not. but I know I see us enforcing a lot of things that are enforceable. I mean, I'm not arguing with you guys that the signs are not in violation of our ordinance. But I remember when we looked at it last time, and I still remember that under the proposed ordinance that we didn't enact, the computer store on the dual highway was okay, but the Burger King wasn't. And I get great fears of what's gonna happen if we start really enforcing all this stuff. And suddenly, and I know the only occasions I've had with their sign ordinance was one, is it Bird Tire with the shock absorber, that we wouldn't let them make bigger than it is, and I go drive by, and every time I drive by it, I think, you know what? That's stupid government. That sign would have been nicer looking than it looks now if it would have been bigger. Then I think about what you guys weren't here for, was the First Christian Church coming in, because they wanted it on North Potomac Street, right up by our house. Staff initially said that sign that's up was illegal, because it was too big because of the way they interpreted the ordinance. And now we have the liquor stores. And I think we all need to understand what these sign ordinances mean if we start enforcing them, because I don't know what they mean. I just know that a bunch of places that we've never, as elected officials, had to complain about, ever, to my knowledge, now we're getting complaints about because the city's going out and saying, you're in violation of our ordinances, which they are, okay? And we enacted the ordinances. This isn't directed at staff. I want to make sure you folks know that. We enacted ordinances. These folks are in violation of the ordinance. Staff has gotten a complaint, and they went and started enforcing. And now we, as the elected body, are getting the ramifications of what some of us have done. And I only suggest we all take a look at this sign ordinance in its entirety and come to realizations how it affects certain businesses. I think there's something in here to say they can't cover up more than 50% of the windows, if I'm correct.
In the downtown.
Right, and you just have to look at things and make a decision. I look at you and say, what's the difference between a window being covered up or a window being taken down and a brick wall being put up where the window was? They're going to have the same view inside. And so that's my suggestion, that's all. I don't know if anybody else agrees with it.
And if you'd like, when that conversation comes, we could come up with examples.
I would love you to,
things like
Steve.
that,
You did that for us
calculated
last
square
time.
footage, things like
Yeah.
that, to give you, because it's hard to have a conversation unless you have examples.
Exactly. And again, this isn't directed negatively at staff. We pared it down last time, but now we're finding ramifications again.
So what you want to do, what you're suggesting is that we put a hold on enforcement of this sign
I
ordinance
would
until?
certainly suggest, especially in the situation I've given you, Kathy, where we're 6 months ahead basically enforcing against one business, when all their competitors are 6 months later getting told, you've got to come into compliance. And just like you gave that owner a substantial time to come into compliance, now the other ones are being given. I just think until we get a resolve, we should stay enforcement. That's my suggestion. I'm only one person.
And in general, we have not been pushing the
I know
issue.
you haven't.
With temporary signage, what happened was there were revisions made probably about, I want to say 3 years ago or so, and there was actually an amortization period where after a certain amount of time, the non-compliant temporary signs were to go away. And right after that is when this Reed v. Gilbert started coming up. So as a result of it, knowing that we had issues, our general attitude was to enforce as necessary, but not push the issue.
And I'm very aware of that.
Okay.
And I agree that that's exactly what you all have done. And matter of fact, I reiterate that the one enforcement that I'm talking about was based upon a complaint. It was not staff just going out and picking on people. I totally, completely understand that.
Whatever the end result is going to be, though, it has to be uniformly
Yes.
applicable.
Yep,
Yes.
Yes.
we agree.
And I'm assuming what you're telling me this case did, I go back many years ago with our first sign ordinance that basically said, Can they still have commercial signs that are advertising an off-site place now? Are they allowed to do that now?
That's still different.
That's a
That's
different
still-
part of our code.
Yes.
It's
So
not-
they
it's
still
not in
can't do
zoning.
that? They still can't put up a sign coming in on Washington Street advertising a business on the Dual Highway?
That's
We allow-
correct.
We allow
Okay.
billboards in another section of the of the
Okay,
city code.
that's, okay.
And that's not addressed through Reed v. Gilbert.
Okay, that's-
Typically, Reed v.
Because it's
Gilbert, for the
commercial?
most part, it's commercial and
Okay.
it's on-site.
Gotcha.
Whereas if I have a, let's say I have a house up on
That's like a
Potomac
billboard,
Avenue,
okay.
and I want to put a billboard in my front lawn
Right.
saying, drink Coke
I got
or
you.
Pepsi, then that's still
That's
it's not
different
affected
story.
and it's not
Okay.
dealt with.
Good.
The things that would take into account would be, for example, if somebody wanted to put up a large sign in their front yard that had a political message, I'm not gonna pick one as an
Right.
example. We have historically never enforced that because of the First Amendment issue. The Supreme Court has said that that can be regulated only, not based on the message, but based on size, et cetera, those kinds
I
of
will,
things.
I will tell you, from one who has personal knowledge, that in the very early 1980s, Larry Vaughn was charged criminally, misdemeanor, with having a political sign in his yard that was against the code. And I know that for a fact because I represented Larry in front of Judge Boblitz in district court on the charge. And you're right, it's known as the First Amendment on that kind of stuff.
But that's an interesting thing about Reed v. Gilbert, because it does, in a way, things have changed a little bit in that regard with Reed v. Gilbert, because what Reed v. Gilbert says is you can't take into account content.
Right, exactly.
Whether it's vote for me, save the whales, or.
Keep America great.
Or my house is for sale.
My house is for
Right.
sale, whatever. Again, it puts them all in the same box.
That's exactly right.
So-
And
so-
you were allowed to have a for sale sign in your yard, but you were not allowed to have a political sign in your yard. And that
Well,
was the
political signs are
problem.
exempted in our code currently.
Well, yeah, I'm again going
Yeah.
way back.
Currently, yeah.
Yeah.
What you're saying though is, in the example that we have a photo of the liquor store with the signs wrapping around the brick
We're on the
columns
freestanding
out
sign,
front.
yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's a liquor advertisement or if it's a sign that says laser tag come in and play, or you either can have that sign or you can't have that sign. Doesn't matter what the message is. It's-
That's correct. The reason why liquor stores are part of this is, if anybody was to think off the top of their head, what is an example of an industry that goes overboard with it? What's the first one's gonna come to your mind? The liquor stores. That just happens to be the most primary visible example.
I thought it would be shoe stores, but okay, yeah.
Shoe
Shoe
stores?
stores. Okay, so,
Okay.
but for example, the maximum amount of signage, you can have a for sale sign if your house is for sale, or you can have a political sign, or you can have a candidate sign.
Right.
But you're limited to how much signage you can have on your property. It's up to you to pick what you decide is the most important.
Yeah, I think, as we look forward on what we want downtown to look like, as we rebuild, you think about some communities where they have very, very strict ordinances on the signs. In other words, the business it can't be a neon sign. It has to be a carved wooden sign, like a Williamsburg. places
I was just gonna say,
yeah,
Williamsburg's a great
places like
example.
that. We need to think a little bit, do we want businesses with signs plastered all over the windows on the front, or do we want to limit that somehow? Have it a little bit more professional.
And the logic on limiting that historically has been, if you have a storefront that's covered with signage, it starts getting into the closed-up perception of a community. To give you an example, things like adult bookstores, they typically, if they have a storefront, they're gonna
Right.
cover their windows all with signage. If you start having a lot of businesses, regardless of whether it's an adult bookstore or a shoe store, you start having that, you start giving the impression in your streetscape of being a closed-up, sketchy environment, essentially.
Declining.
Yeah, declining environment. So,
I agree.
So that is our presentation. The public hearing is scheduled for November 27th. We have to advertise it twice, so that process has begun, 1-week intervals. We attached to all this material we provided to you with giant binder clips is the text, the way it would look, as well as the PowerPoint for the 27th. And so on the 27th, that's what we'll be working from, is the PowerPoint.
If I could
Light
just,
reading.
and if I could just point out a couple of quick things in the package, I don't think Kathy probably picked them out when she was giving her presentation before I arrived. There's a couple of things in the ordinance that we, or this package that we put in specifically at the, or addressed at the direction of this body. One of which is there was the concern of what happened out at McCleary Hill regarding how that developed out with all of these houses on bulk lots. You
Yeah.
did touch on that. Okay,
did.
so then I don't need to
I
elaborate on
heard
that.
that.
So we are addressing that.
Kathy did a very good job.
Okay,
I listened to you.
then I think I'll be quiet then.
He wanted to be sure we pointed it out, and I did.
And we are going to come back later with a revision of the cell tower regulations. The ones that we have are the first ones that were ever adopted with only minor amendments. The industry has changed a lot. We didn't have it ready for this package, but we're going to come forward with a package rewriting those provisions and bringing it up to current standards.
That I
Oh.
did not touch on.
One of the provisions, and this is a temporary fix until we do the rewrite, one of the things that came up in the North High issue was the fact that stealth facilities don't have they don't have a height limitation, but also they don't have a fall radius requirement like other towers, other provisions do. So what we did is we put into the provision that if that there's a certain percentage of the height of the tower to create a fall radius. This is a temporary fix, not that we expect that we're going to be getting any other stealth facilities in the next few months until we rewrite these provisions. But we thought we ought to tack that in because we thought that was kind of a peculiar oversight, that in theory somebody could do a stealth tower that looks like a tree 10 feet from a property line. That seems pretty ridiculous. So that's kind of just a patch. It's temporary to fill a hole until we come back to you with a package that completely brings that whole section of the ordinance up to current standards.
Okay. Thank you, guys. All right, next up is the administration goal setting, 2018 through 2020.
Yes, when you last met on, I think this October 16th, I believe you went all the way through the budget stabilization. Yeah, I believe that's where you left off. You went through that one. I don't think you had any changes on anything, but of course, if you've now thought of something different or you would like to go back to one of those sections and make a change, you're certainly welcome to do that. But Parks and Recreation for Active Healthy Living is where you could begin.
Okay, let's begin then.
I'm good with everything.
We're good with those three bullet points? Subject to money and
Yes, of course.
Yep. Okay. Innovative, progressive government.
One of the things that I think that would be helpful, and I don't know if this is included in high focus on customer service innovations, is to add an option for a pay over the phone for like utility bills and such.
We do that already,
But I
correct?
think you
Scott?
have to talk with, I mean, is there an electron where they can save your information? You have to
Yeah,
talk to
okay,
someone.
Okay.
So I think that, I mean, this is, you know, that would be a real advancement for the department because there's not a lot of folks in the department. So I think that that would be, I don't know if that's included in that, but I would like to see that if possible.
Right now, with the software, both financial and phone, we can't do that.
Oh, okay.
That's something we could request as an enhancement.
Okay.
Well, we can keep that in mind for sure, if the
Yeah.
body likes that idea, yeah.
I just think it makes it easier, because there's a lot of people that just want to call in and make a payment over the phone, and whether they don't do it online or whatever, you know, not everybody has access to that, so.
Scott mentioned in our meeting that we're not fully utilizing Munis, and should that be a goal? I mean, we've got the software package, should that be a goal to fully utilize it, or?
Does that cost more money?
We're already doing, we're already doing that. I mean, HR's taken, the lead and starting on that, so if you wanna add it, that's great. But we've already started towards that.
Okay.
Now that we've got our latest version upgrade completed last month.
Okay.
And then the customer kiosks, this is plural. I mean, I don't know if that sounds, I don't know if we just need one customer kiosk in the downtown area, or if we need a couple, but
I would think maybe,
two?
maybe we could implement, not get ahead of ourselves, I think maybe what we could do is implement one that is integrated into City Hall somehow, maybe, you know, on the Franklin Street side, have like a kiosk that's accessible to, you know, the staff to maintain or whatever from inside, and then have it accessible to people on the outside to come up and do their business. Everybody
Yeah, that
knows
was
where,
gonna yeah, that's gonna take some, you know, some work to
I mean,
figure out how
everybody
we
knows
do
what
that.
City Hall
Yeah.
is, everybody knows, you know, I mean, people come here, they pull up out front every time, park in a no parking area, and, you know, go inside, pay a bill, put a ticket, you know, put money in the ticket thing or whatever.
Now,
I think-
a good place to do that is in our parking decks.
I was thinking the same thing, actually.
That's what I was
Frederick-
thinking.
That's where Frederick has, if you wanna pay a parking ticket, you go in the parking deck. And they have like 5-minute parking spaces for that type of stuff, right close.
That, or what about the public lot, you know,
E-
next
either
next
one,
to
but
the visitor center?
Like in
You're
the
not saying about
Elizabeth
the
Hager
parking
building?
deck, it's
Yeah.
enclosed. you know.
Is the Elizabeth Hager building, would that be accessible
That could work too.
24
I mean,
hours?
it'll take some analysis to look at that, but I think that, yeah, any of those areas.
But I would say start with one,
One,
let's do a
yeah.
proof of concept and see if people, if we may build this thing and nobody uses it.
Yeah, which is why I was thinking when the plural seemed, you know, for a 2-year, you know, for the amount of time that we have left in this term, that,
Okay.
So one kiosk conveniently located someplace.
Yes, okay.
and this also, is this where it includes online permit applications? Is that in this section?
Says provide ability for application for all types of city permits online.
Oh, there it is,
24/7
sorry.
access.
Missed it. It's just number 2. That's all I have for that one.
Anybody else have anything for innovative progressive government? Suggestions? Okay. Community promotion and pride. City of Hagerstown will take the lead of improving our community image by releasing factual, timely, and transparent messaging.
We talked about, and I don't know how you really put this in a goal, but we talked about image management and needing to focus on countering the negative images that people are posting on social media. I don't know if you can structure it in terms of a goal.
Well, I think that's what the first bullet point is meant to be, is, I mean, it's a simple bullet point, but there's a lot, there would be a lot in there. That's the idea of creating the image marketing plan that would include those such things as countering some of the negativity and finding a positive way to get our word out.
I feel like this has to be a priority, because I feel like we're absolutely failing in this category. And I look at what other jurisdictions have done, and even what the county is doing right now, and it's like constant, all day, every day, updates about what's going on in the county, even like little staff iPhone videos of like just a meeting that they're in that day, or a grand opening they did, or a store that they visited. And I think we need to follow suit, because that creates a positive environment, and then different investors or whoever that meeting was with, different restaurants, businesses, they share it, gets them publicity, it gets the county publicity. I think we absolutely need to be doing that in the strategic marketing campaign that we had touched on previously, like partner with Main Street and they've been applying for grants to do even those, the poll things that we had talked about a couple weeks ago. Just really getting something going with our messaging and positive messaging.
I think that's paramount for all the other things to fall into place. I think that I agree with the fact that it needs to be a priority. Not an easy priority, but I think that it's definitely necessary.
I think whatever it is has to be uniform.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right now, we've participated in funding of 8 of the larger buildings that either have been redeveloped or are going through redevelopment downtown. And I guarantee you that most of the public couldn't
I have no
name
idea.
2 of them.
I have no idea.
But I can also guarantee you that every less than positive item that folks read about that may happen in the city and have nothing to do with the city, our governmental process, can be associated with the city by that same, 80% of the public. And whether it's Main Street or whatever organizations and entities and efforts that we exercise, I think it needs to be uniform and present. And right now, I don't think that it is.
I mentioned this last time, I'm on my phone, so I'm trying to find something, but I mentioned this last time briefly, and it got taken out of context by what was printed in the news article, but I said about having a citywide contest about a hashtag or about a slogan, and people took it as I meant, let's let the public do all the jobs that we're supposed to do. That's not what I meant. I meant people are creative. I'm not creative at all when it comes to stuff like that. But why don't we could make it a citywide contest and engage our citizens, like, hey, we want to move forward in positivity. What are some ideas that you have? And then we could pick a favorite and kind of use that as our marketing, figuring out where to go from there. And I had posted about that, and I just wanted to read you a couple immediately. Someone said, hashtag progress Hagerstown, hashtag Hagerstown has it, happily Hagerstown, Hagerstown strong. Like, I mean, I wouldn't have thought of happily Hagerstown. I'm not creative like that, but there are creative people out there that have strong ideas. I thought it would be cool to ask for them, and then we could work on using that as a message of positivity going forward. I think anytime you can engage the community and get them excited about a positive message, it helps.
Well, then they'll, it's community buy-in too. So then,
Exactly,
if they're if they're helping us to choose and helping us to create, then they'll feel a part of it too. And maybe not look at us as the enemy.
Right.
I hope.
The citizens need to have ownership of the whole direction that we're going in, and the constant message, Hagerstown sucks, or there's nothing to do here. That 9 people out of 10 that you talk to on the street, they know that's not true. And some, in some realm, they know that's not true. But the ones who keep posting that, I think we need those 9 out of 10 people to come back and counter that themselves.
Absolutely.
I think if we all as citizens can take responsibility for defending the city and for moving the city forward, not just this group. I can't do anything. Lou can't do it. We can't really do anything, but the citizens can.
Well, and maybe to even take that group of people that submit and, create like an ambassador group of them to help create and change the perception and continually promote it. We select one winner of the hashtag or the slogan or whatever, and then we create an ambassador group for them to help us promote positivity somehow.
I mean, those groups make a difference. Last year, Kristen and I spoke to Leadership Washington County here about a government, and we had talked about that negative image. So they made it a focus of their group to go home that night and all go on our social media pages and like it, 5-star rate it, instead of all the 1-star Hagerstown sucks ratings. And it changed our rating on our page significantly in a night. And that matters when people are looking at things like that. Who wants to go to a city that's got a 1.3-star rating and all it talks about is how negative it is? I mean, if you can engage groups like that, little changes like that make a big difference. You gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, I do think that it's first and foremost in this goals. You know, I think it's very, very,
And then,
very important.
that's just the attitude that can be projected by our citizens. And then to Kristen's point, though, then what we need to do is advertise some of the things that the city has done in terms of economic development, some of the buildings, the revamping and revitalization of buildings, and what we're doing or going to do better to make developers want to do more buildings like that, making it easier to do business and easier to redevelop in the city.
Yeah. We went to Penmar breakfast, last week, 2 weeks ago. They didn't even know about the Invest Hagerstown program yet.
Yeah.
I mean, they were really excited when they learned about it. It's just how do we get that out there better and quicker?
It is amazing, because I'll talk to people, you know, at the gym and places like that, that will bring up stuff, and they, yes, I go to the gym. But, no, people don't have any idea what is available or what has been done.
Well, even the Thai restaurant next door, when we did the grand opening, and we were sitting there, I was having to debate on there about, well, it was already a Thai restaurant, what happened? They, new business, it looks like it's the same business. And I'm like, no, this is a great thing, this is the best Thai food around. So, just it's that constant, even if there is something good. But I think that the positivity can be contagious, and I think that it's I think that it's, and staff has to be on that contagious, bandwagon too, through customer service and code and, permitting and all those things. Like, everyone has to have that same energy, that we are the best city to live, work, and play.
And develop it.
And develop.
Because I'm sure we'll talk about it again, we need to counter this perception that we are hard to do business with.
Correct.
The whole issue of developers don't want to develop here because it's easier to do business in Gaithersburg or someplace else.
Yeah, I mean.
We still hear that
Yeah.
almost daily.
Yep.
Almost daily, if not daily. I mean, I had someone call me the other day and say they wouldn't ever put another penny in the city because it was so difficult to work here. Like, we're having the same conversation we had 2 years ago. It's like, how do we change that environment?
So I'm not sure if that means that we change anything on here, on these 3 bullet
No,
points,
no, I
but.
think that's the idea, that's, staff is already thinking of some
Yeah.
thoughts, and, we'll have to get back to you with that plan. But the idea of getting the community involved in the contest, I think that's pretty cool, too.
Okay, economic development through sports and tourism. City of Hagerstown will be creative and diversify opportunities for economic development through non-traditional means.
I'm okay with those 2 things.
Those were added on there from the conversation that we've had, and also because of the fact that you've already approved steps along those manners by approving the RFPs to be completed. Now, that just says RFP, it doesn't say you're going to build a sports comp. So
No.
there's more to come from that, but these are the points that you have already approved.
Yeah, I think, in my view, a better goal under that would be research all opportunities for sports tourism. I mean, it's not just a sports.
Not
place.
limited to just those 2, right.
Just be specific.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Austin gets the wordsmithing award.
Good job, Austin.
About time you contributed. Did you go to the gym, by the way?
I do.
All right, citizen-based government. City of Hagerstown believes in an ethical and financially responsible government while supporting an engaged citizenry to make the community more than the sum of its parts. I know we saw the promote awareness and understanding of the city's finances through accessible and easy-to-use data presentations. We got that chart of where general fund money.
Where does your money go?
Yeah.
You know, where do your
Small
tax
piece of
dollars
it,
go?
yep. It looked really good.
I think we should go one step further with that, and not so much in that, and I want to, while we're on this, because of what we did with the chart, go back to public safety, and maybe, because I get questioned all the time, Chief, about, Chief Kiefer, about why can't we hire police officers? And maybe if there was an explanation about, what we look for and the challenges that we have, that it's not just about dollars and cents, it's other challenges, and then explain, where we're headed currently, what kind of plan we have now. Maybe that would put some people at ease about, the fact that we may be down in our patrol division some or whatever. And, any kind of information like that that can help to put people's mind at ease when it comes to public safety, I think is good. And hopefully we can put something together sooner rather than later to let people know that. Grow the Hagerstown Strong Program, a volunteer outreach group, pairing volunteers with government staff, continue to support the Main Street program and those volunteer groups. I think we see that we do that, and we just did that this evening with the Chris Kindle.
Continue to do that, right?
Yep. Grow a foundation of active and engaged residents who serve on various city boards and commissions, and Shelley, you're still working toward the youth advisory group, right?
Correct.
Something like that would fit
Yes.
perfectly
Yep.
into that
Yeah.
category.
Yeah.
And improve access to city website information for mobile device users. Does anybody remember when we had a presentation about see something, send something, that app?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody remembers that presentation, right?
I do.
It just amazes me that when I ask someone if they have that app on their phone, or, really? There's an app to that?
People
Every-
don't watch these meetings.
Are you
No.
kidding? Yeah, but it was on social media.
But not
I mean, it was on
hardly.
social media, it was, but still.
But to
it's-
be on social media, it's a different, like if you sponsor a post, if you boost it, I mean, there's like a lot of
I don't know
strategy
how you
that
get the-
goes into all
how
of
do you
those
get the message out?
things.
'Cause
Right.
I just thought that if Emily liked it, 9,000 people would.
Every single week,
True.
every single
Maybe.
week, I bring it up on, I've got the
I talked about
next
the city on
door
Facebook.
and Ring
Why?
security apps on my phone. And every week, somebody will post something like, here's a video I took of somebody stealing something in front of my house or whatever. And it's like, do you have the app? Did you
Right.
upload the video to the app? Did you send it to
Did
the
you call
police department?
HPD? I mean, it's
And-
like, did you call HPD?
But it's so easy with that app to do it.
It is.
And real time, get somebody looking for the person. I don't know how we get that message. We're missing something. Somehow we're missing.
Well, I mean, I don't know, we have a television channel that we could be doing it on, and I know a lot of people don't watch that either, but
I mean, it's boosted social media posting is what it
I
comes
mean, the
down
reality
to.
is, most folks want their government delivered, while you stop it at a convenience store on the corner. I mean, that's the reality, and so if you can't deliver government, like you're stopping at Sheetz to get gas and you get the other 18 things you're thinking about, folks won't typically make that extra effort to, investigate and find those other conveniences that are available.
Well, maybe it comes down to stickers, like Back the Blue, those are pretty popular, so maybe we come with a sticker that we put on convenience stores, windows or something, to make
it doesn't take up too much
sign
space.
ordinance. It can't be bigger, whatever though. Anyway, so we can put stickers, and create like that same message over and over again. It's continuation.
It's marketing.
Yeah, it's marketing.
It is
We can't say it one
Simple
time and
product
expect like
marketing.
the entire city to know like, oh, that's right. send something, say something. Say something, send something.
Well, and, you know, I mean, I know it's old-fashioned, but like a billboard, you know, I mean, I think that's,
I mean, it could be effective. A little old school, but
that's what I'm saying, so I understand
I
that.
don't know, I mean, I see that one on Basil Boulevard, at the intersection of Basil and Burhan's, all the time.
yeah, there's prime locations for some, but you know, imagine how many stickers we could
Billboards
produce.
are $1,200.
Is there any
I
advantage
mean,
to
you can
doing-
take $1,200 and invest it in radio, TV, and social media and get a lot further than a
Yeah.
billboard.
It's just consistency. It's consistency and it's,
On the see something, send something, that's just an idea. I know adults usually are stupid, and how they learn about things is from their kids.
Took
And
the
their
words out
kids,
of my mouth. I
their
was gonna
kids
say
find
schools.
out new things, they bring it home, they show mom and dad. Is that a place to
That is.
start with this?
Well, as far as I know, the Board of Education is already working toward putting that program into our school system.
Hopefully
Now, I will
so.
tell you
That's the
that
way.
Emily and I were at the high school last Monday, or what month was it, last Tuesday?
Yeah.
None of the students that were in that classroom had ever heard of that.
Yeah.
And
Right,
that's the
that's-
only thing though, is, and then when they did, their response was to smirk and giggle and like look at each other like, we're not snitching on our friends, you know, so then we had to have that conversation, so I think it's a good idea to put it in schools, but then you're always gonna have that population that is like, I'm not telling the cops. I mean, they're 14, 15-year-old kids, and that was the response we got. I mean, he said that, and it was just a room full of like, yeah, right.
it was completely different when we said with the Penmar Realtors, when they were like, oh, this
Yeah.
is fantastic. We
Yeah,
had no
so-
idea, you know?
I mean, I think there are a lot of teenagers who would absolutely take it, but
Okay, all right, so.
I think, I only have one other additional comment, and I don't know if this would be a goal or not, but we talked about this at one point earlier about taking the temperature of staff to see what their thoughts were on how things were going, whether they have ideas.
We're already working on getting
Good.
surveys
A
done.
survey?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Wendy's sitting back there. We've got some different
Oh,
ideas
hi,
about the
Wendy.
different types of surveys and what we would want to do.
Citywide survey for our employees as well as a separate wellness survey.
Awesome, that's good to hear. Thank
I mean,
you.
Survey Monkey's free, and you can create it in 5 minutes. I mean, we just did one with Washington Goes Purple, and it was seriously bam, 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 send it out, and we had 117 responses in 3 days. It's free and it's easy.
Yeah,
You know,
I've been using that for about 12, 15 years now.
Good. It's good to know that that's
Yeah,
being,
because we really haven't done that sort of pulse with employees
Yeah.
citywide, so. I think
be
that's-
interested to
Yep.
hear what they have to say.
Okay,
I have
well,
one
any other
item.
suggestions? Go
Oh,
ahead.
Kristen.
I do, just one, and this is because I don't recall the discussion about it last time, I had to leave the meeting early. It is item number 3 under public safety, sustain a focus for the city fire system and the all hazards mission. I guess my basic question is that speaking to the concept of the presentation that we were made aware of consolidating, possibly consolidating firehouses, relocating some, and creating greater
Yes,
efficiency?
it's anything that you want it to be, correct. I mean, the idea was,
So,
for all the conversations we've had about fire service and all hazards missions and everything that Chief has talked to you about, for the last couple of years, continuing on that path, possible consolidation, possibly trying to get the additional revenue sources that we need, working with the county again to try to do those things. So it's all of that and anything more that this body would want us to add.
I just didn't want that sort of blanket bullet point to get lost in generics and ambiguity of folks seeing that and go, well, we didn't know that's what it meant. I mean, I tell you flat out, I mean, I've been a proponent of that idea for more than some time now of, the city going its way on creating those efficiencies of a system that we have that just simply operates differently than the countywide system.
Correct.
And finding a niche for how we're going to do that. I just don't want that statement to be so generic that frankly speaking, that the volunteer companies within the city and the other partners in the process go, well, you know, it really doesn't say that, so that must not be a goal of the mayor and council. And if it's not a goal of the majority, you know what I mean?
I think the goal
then we shouldn't say.
was to implement those recommendations made by the chief. That's how I
Yeah,
would.
I just don't want this statement to be
No, I
of a
understand.
level of sensitivity where we say, you know what, we really don't want to say that, because that's
Oh,
I'd
no, I
rather just say,
understand what
look,
you're
that
saying.
is
I
what
don't-
I'm saying.
I don't mind
and I
that
don't care about the
actually
sensitivities.
explicitly being put in there.
Well, you can give me a quote or give me a sentence, then I'll add it in there. If you want something more specific, we can
Yeah, I-
certainly do that.
You know, like I said, I just want to make sure that folks understand that's a serious conversation, that this body is seriously ready
And
to
remember, I mean,
embark on.
each of these items, some of these are very, kind of general, but they are that. So
Yeah.
staff is going to have to come back to you maybe multiple times on several of these things to really understand
Yeah.
what you want to do with that. But we can
And to
put
bring
something more
suggestions that we
specific in
can,
it.
and where they fit into
Right.
the pool.
And it's not, and this is a general goals for your next 2 years. It doesn't mean that this is set in stone and you can't do anything else if something comes up. So, I mean, this is something that could be changed or added to or deleted from, but it just gives staff, those, I guess, playbook to continue to bring items to you in your work sessions.
So the goal is listen to Chief Ward, is that what you're?
I don't know, I just
Put in
That's
here.
my goal.
I just don't
Give
want it to
Chief
be-
whatever he asks for,
What the
right?
chief says, that's what.
And then,
that's
like,
the
look at
goal.
look at the rest of the
All the
department
chiefs.
heads.
Anything else on this? All right, Valerie?
Okay, so what we will do is make the few changes that we had tonight. Not too many, but we'll make those changes and then bring this back to you in a motion for your November 27th meeting. And I don't have any additional comments.
Okay. Emily? No? Kristen? Austin?
Just a couple things. Had an opportunity to attend an excellent presentation on the Opportunity Zone, opportunities for developers here. Really, I hope this is another thing that we can get the word out on. Jill and Danelle did a great job putting that together with Frank Dixon from the state. And there are some fantastic opportunities for investing or encouraging investment in economically disadvantaged zones. And I think that's, as we try to get the word out to the realtors, to the developers, to people who weren't at that meeting, that we don't let that get lost in the fog or just be a program that existed and we never took advantage of. There's a lot of follow-on ideas to that, and a lot of it is it's not completely ironed out yet. There's going to be some legal challenges as you go through it, but I think that's something that we can really take advantage of. And the only other thing I wanted to ask if we could just do a little research for next time. I went to the Hana Thai opening, and restaurant looks great. Everything we said we were going to do, we've done to that space, including the security on the bathroom doors and all that kind of stuff is all done. Went back, looked at the new kitchen, and kitchen looks fantastic. But I wanted to find out, one of the things we were going to do is rebuild the deck in the back. The deck in the back is a huge safety hazard.
That is still in your SIP, it's in your.
It's out for bid right now.
Okay, yeah. I wanted to make sure we, hadn't lost sight of that because somebody's gonna take a nosedive off that thing. That's all I have.
Lou?
Oh, no, thanks.
John?
Just really quickly, the MML dinners that we're always invited to, which are very nice, I would like to see the city of Hagerstown host one of the MML dinners.
We used to. I don't know why we haven't gotten away from that.
We haven't had, not since I've been here.
I didn't know.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And
It's 2014.
14.
Yeah, that seems like a long time. So I
Not in
would,
regular rotation, we're kind of a fill-in, and they, there for a while, we didn't have a space big enough, and we've used the Academy Theater.
It seemed like ours was always March.
In January.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think that it
I'm
would
all
be,
in favor, yeah.
especially with all of the, you know, the new economic development and all the progress that has been made, I think that it would be nice, and it doesn't cost the city any more. So I think it would be a nice gesture to be able to
We
host.
hosted one the first year that South Potomac Street was done, and we hosted it upstairs of 28 South, in the ballroom, and people were, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. Above Mike Fitzgerald's in that ballroom, one of them, I don't know.
So,
Yeah.
Cool.
Good with that?
That's it.
I have, Friday night, I attended the very rainy Gridiron Classic at South High, where the South Hagerstown Rebels tore into the North High Hubs with a score of 43-0. So, and South High will play Westminster this Friday at 7 o'clock. Gates open, I guess, at 6 at South High. Guess what? It's supposed to be rainy and cold. So it's a great night for football again. I tell you what, they do well in the rain, yes. But, you know, as miserable as the weather was, and as one-sided as the game was, very impressed by the sportsmanship of both teams. I mean, I've never been to, professional or otherwise, watch a game where the other team is helping the other teammates up, like after every play. I was just amazed. So it was good for the heart anyway. So not so much good for the score, but good for the heart. I want to mention our condolences to the Nye family on the passing of Bobby. And he'll be missed. He was an asset to Penny, number one, but to the city also. So condolences to the Nye family, and know that our thoughts and prayers are with you. So other than that, I'm done. See you next Tuesday.